Selenai adjusted the delicate crystal ornaments in her hair as she entered the Grand Hall. The Galactic Coalition's Cultural Exchange Gala was in full swing, with representatives from dozens of species mingling beneath the floating light spheres. Her wings, thin and iridescent, caught the light as she moved through the crowd. As a Valorian, she had been raised to appreciate beauty and peace above all else. She noticed him immediately, though she could not say why. He stood near the refreshment tables, a human. Selenai had heard stories about humans, of course. Everyone had. They came from a death world called Earth, a planet so hostile that merely living there was considered an extreme survival challenge. The rumors painted them as aggressive, unpredictable, potentially dangerous. The Coalition had only recently accepted them as members, and many species remained cautious. But this human did not look dangerous at all. He was tall by human standards, with dark hair touched with gray at the temples. He wore formal diplomatic attire that was perfectly tailored, and he held a glass of Valorian wine with practiced ease. What struck Selenai most was his expression. He was studying a wall mural depicting the First Harmony, an ancient Valorian artwork, and his face showed genuine appreciation. "It's beautiful, isn't it?" she found herself saying as she approached him. The human turned, and his eyes, a warm brown color, met hers. He smiled, and it transformed his entire face. "Beautiful doesn't do it justice," he said in perfect Valorian, without even a hint of an accent. "The way the artist captured the moment when our ancestors chose peace over war. I've studied this piece for hours, and I still find new details." Selenai's antennae perked up in surprise. "You speak Valorian?" "Among other languages," he said, switching smoothly to Galactic Common. "I'm Ambassador Marcus Webb, Earth's cultural envoy to Valoria." "And you are?" "Selenai. I work with the Coalition's Arts Council." She found herself intrigued. Most species find our language difficult. The tonal variations remind me of certain Earth languages, Marcus finished. Mandarin Chinese, for instance, uses similar tonal structures. Once you understand the pattern, it's quite logical. He gestured to the mural. "I've been trying to understand Valorian art philosophy. The concept that beauty can be a form of resistance to chaos." They talked for over an hour. Marcus knew not just Valorian art, but also its history, its cultural context, its philosophy. He quoted Valorian poets from memory and discussed the nuances of their meaning. When Selenai mentioned she played the crystal harp, his face lit up. "I've been trying to learn," he admitted, "though I'm terrible at it. My fingers are too thick, and I can never quite get the resonance right." "Perhaps I could teach you," Selenai offered, surprising herself with her boldness. "I would like that very much," Marcus said. And his smile was so genuine that Selenai felt her concerns about humans begin to fade. Over the following months, they met regularly. Marcus proved to be a dedicated student of the crystal harp, though he was right about his limitations. His large human hands struggled with the delicate strings, but he practiced with patience and determination. More than that, he seemed to genuinely love the music itself. "On Earth, we have an instrument called a harp too," he told her during one lesson. "It's much larger with metal strings. The sound is different, deeper, but the principle is the same, creating beauty through vibration and resonance." They attended poetry readings together. Marcus introduced her to human literature, translating Earth poems into Galactic Common. She was surprised by their depth, their emotion, their understanding of pain and hope. "I thought humans were supposed to be warriors," she said one evening as they walked through the botanical gardens. Marcus was quiet for a moment. "Humans are many things," he said finally. "Yes, we come from a difficult world. Yes, we've fought wars. But we've also created symphonies and paintings and stories. We've built libraries and museums. We've spent just as much effort trying to understand the universe through science and philosophy as we have trying to survive in it. The other species say Earth is a death world. Selenai pressed. It can be harsh, Marcus admitted. We have predators, diseases, natural disasters. But we also have sunsets that take your breath away, music that makes you weep, and the capacity for kindness that defies all logic. He stopped walking and turned to face her. I'm not going to lie to you, Selenai. Humans can be violent. We have a dark history. But we also have the capacity to choose differently, to be better. And I choose to be someone who creates rather than destroys. His honesty touched her. Over time, Selenai introduced Marcus to her family. Her parents were initially skeptical. A human suitor was unexpected, but Marcus won them over with his respect for Valorian customs, his gentle manner, and his obvious devotion to their daughter. He recited the 18 poems of First Light from memory, her mother said, amazed. In perfect classical Valorian. A year after they met, Marcus asked Selenai to marry him. He did it in the traditional Valorian way, presenting her with a crystal he had carved himself, crude by Valorian standards, but made precious by the effort and care he had put into it. I know I'm not what your family expected, he said. I know humans have a reputation. But I love you, Selenai. I want to spend my life learning from you, creating beauty with you, building something peaceful and good. She said yes. Their wedding blended human and Valorian traditions. They exchanged vows under the twin moons of Valoria, with Marcus wearing traditional Valorian ceremonial robes and Selenai wearing a white dress in the Earth style. Human guests sang ancient songs, and Valorian musicians played the crystal harp. It was a celebration of two worlds coming together. Marcus accepted a permanent posting on Valoria. Earth will always be my home, he told Selenai. But you are my future. They settled into a comfortable apartment in the Garden District, where Marcus planted earth flowers in their greenhouse. He continued his work as a cultural ambassador, teaching human literature at the university and organizing exchange programs. Selenai worked at the Coalition Arts Center, curating exhibitions that brought together artwork from across the galaxy. In the evenings, they would sit in their garden, Marcus playing his awkward but heartfelt music on the crystal harp, while Selenai worked on her poetry. Life was peaceful, beautiful, and full of gentle moments. Selenai had never been happier. She had found a partner who shared her values, who appreciated beauty and peace, who treated her with kindness and respect. The rumors about humans being dangerous seemed absurd now. Marcus was the gentlest person she had ever known. She had no idea what was coming. 3 years passed like a pleasant dream. Selenai woke each morning to find Marcus already awake, tending to his earth plants in the greenhouse. He had a remarkable collection, now roses, lavender, tomatoes, even a small oak tree that he was carefully nurturing in a large pot. He would return to their bedroom with fresh flowers, placing them in a vase on her knitstand before gently waking her with a kiss. "Good morning, my love," he would say, always patient, always kind. Marcus had become a beloved figure in Valorian society. His classes on human literature at the university were always full, with students fascinated by Earth's rich cultural history. He hosted monthly salons at their home, where artists and intellectuals from various species would gather to discuss philosophy, art, and the nature of beauty. He spoke 7 galactic languages fluently now and was learning an 8th. "Your husband is remarkable," Selenai's colleagues told her regularly. "So cultured, so refined. You're very lucky." She knew she was. Marcus never raised his voice, never showed impatience or anger. When they disagreed, which was rare, he discussed things calmly and rationally. He remembered every important date, brought her small gifts for no reason, and supported her career ambitions without hesitation. If there was anything unusual about Marcus, it was subtle. He maintained an exercise routine that seemed excessive for someone living such a peaceful life. Every morning, before the greenhouse, he would disappear into their home gym for 2 hours. Sel and I had walked in once and found him running on the treadmill at a speed that seemed dangerous, his face blank and focused. He had smiled when he saw her and slowed to a walk, but she had glimpsed something in his eyes, a kind of intensity that vanished so quickly she wondered if she had imagined it. He had scars, too. She had noticed them early in their relationship. A long white line across his ribs, burn marks on his shoulder, a strange circular scar on his thigh that looked almost like a bullet wound. Though when she asked, Marcus had shrugged and said something vague about an accident in his youth. "I was clumsy as a young man," he had said with a self-deprecating smile. "Learn to be more careful." Then there was the locked room. Their apartment had 5 rooms, and Marcus used one as a private study. He kept it locked, and while Sel and I had asked about it once, Marcus had simply said it contained old documents and personal effects from his life before Valoria. "Nothing interesting," he had assured her. "Just things I'm not ready to throw away, but don't need to access regularly." She had accepted the explanation. Everyone was entitled to privacy. Occasionally, Marcus received encrypted messages from Earth. He would read them on his personal datapad, his expression unreadable, and then delete them. "Routine diplomatic updates," he would say if she asked. Bureaucratic nonsense, mostly. Life continued peacefully until the day the news broke. Sel and I was at the Arts Center when the emergency broadcast interrupted all regular programming. The Kroll Dominion, a predatory empire from the Outer Rim, had issued an ultimatum to the Galactic Coalition. They demanded access to Coalition trade routes, mining rights to several inhabited worlds, and the surrender of 3 border systems. They gave the Coalition 1 month to comply, and if we refuse, the Coalition spokesperson had asked during the broadcast. The Kroll ambassador's response was blunt. "Then we will take what we want by force." Panic swept through Valoria. The Valorians were artists as philosophers, not warriors. They had no military to speak of, only a small defense force meant to deal with pirates and smugglers. The Kroll Dominion had conquered a dozen worlds in the past century. They were ruthless, efficient, and overwhelmingly powerful. That evening, Sel and I came home to find Marcus standing at the window, staring out at the city lights. He didn't turn when she entered. "Marcus?" "I heard the news," he said quietly. His voice sounded different, somehow flatter, more distant. "Everyone is terrified," Sel and I said, moving to stand beside him. "The Coalition is calling an emergency assembly. But what can we do? Most member species don't have real militaries. We're scholars and traders, not soldiers." Marcus was silent for a long moment. "What will Valoria do?" he asked finally. "Run, probably. Evacuate if it comes to that." Sel and I felt tears building. "We're not fighters, Marcus. We never have been. That's not who we are." "No," Marcus agreed softly. "That's not who you are." Something in his tone made her look at him more closely. His jaw was tight, his hands clasped behind his back. She realized, with a start, that he was standing at attention, like a soldier. "Marcus, are you all right?" He turned to her, and for just a moment, she saw something in his eyes, something cold and calculating, before his expression softened to the familiar warmth she knew. "I'm fine, love. Just worried. Let's not think about it tonight." But over the following days, Marcus changed. He spent hours in encrypted communications with Earth. He would emerge from his study with his face drawn and tired. He stopped attending his classes, taking a leave of absence that shocked his students. His exercises became more intense. Sel and I would wake in the night to hear him in the gym, pushing himself through routines that seemed designed to hurt. The Coalition Assembly convened. Species after species pledged their limited military resources small. Patrol fleets, defense forces, volunteer militias. It was painfully inadequate. The Kroll armada numbered in the hundreds. The coalition could barely muster 50 combat-capable ships. Then the human delegation stood. Earth offers to handle the situation, Ambassador Chun said calmly. We'll send a task force. The chamber erupted in skeptical murmurs. Humans were new to the coalition, barely 20 years as members. What could they possibly do against the Kroll Dominion? How many ships? The Valorian representative asked. 12, Ambassador Chun replied. Laughter rippled through the assembly. 12 ships against the Kroll's 300? It was suicide. That night, Marcus came home late. Selenai was waiting for him. I've been recalled, he said without preamble. I'm leaving tomorrow. Recalled? What do you mean? Marcus ran a hand through his hair, looking more exhausted than she had ever seen him. I need to return to my old work. Before I was a diplomat. Before I came to Valoria. What old work? Marcus, you're a cultural ambassador, a teacher. No, he interrupted gently. That's what I became. That's what I chose to be. But it's not what I was. Fear crept into Selenai's heart. Then what were you? Marcus looked at her for a long moment, and she saw conflict in his eyes, the desire to protect her from the truth warring with the need for honesty. I can't explain now, he said finally. But I promise, when I come back, I'll tell you everything. No more locked doors, no more secrets. And if you don't come back? He pulled her into an embrace, holding her tight. I will. I promise I will. The next morning, a human military vessel landed at the spaceport. Selenai insisted on coming with Marcus to see him off. The ship was dark and angular, nothing like the elegant civilian vessels she was used to. The human soldiers who greeted Marcus saluted sharply. Commander Webb, one of them said. Good to have you back, sir. Commander? Marcus turned to Selenai one last time. He kissed her, long and deep, and when he pulled away, there were tears in his eyes. I love you, he said. Remember that, no matter what you learn about me, I love you. Then he boarded the ship, and she watched it rise into the sky until it disappeared among the stars, leaving her alone with questions and a growing sense of dread. Selenai couldn't sleep. She kept replaying the moment over and over in her mind. The soldier calling Marcus Commander. The way he had walked onto that military ship like he belonged there. The secrets in his eyes. 3 days after Marcus left, news came that changed everything. The Kroll Dominion had attacked a coalition border world called Novara. The defense fleet had been overwhelmed in hours. Thousands were dead. Millions more were fleeing as Kroll ground forces occupied the major cities. The brutality of the invasion shocked the galaxy. The Kroll weren't just conquering, they were making an example, showing what happened to those who resisted. The Coalition Emergency Assembly met again, and this time the mood was pure panic. That's when Selenai made her decision. She had to know the truth. She returned to their apartment and stood before the locked door of Marcus's study. She had respected his privacy for 3 years, but now, with war erupting and her husband revealed as someone she didn't really know, that respect felt like willful ignorance. She broke the lock. The room was small and sparse. A desk, a chair, a simple shelving unit. But what was on those shelves made Selenai's blood turn cold. Military commendations in frames. Dozens of them. Medals she didn't recognize. Citations written in formal Earth military language. One caught her eye for extraordinary valor under fire during the Battle of Caracas. Commander Marcus Webb led a successful extraction of civilian refugees while under sustained enemy bombardment, refusing to evacuate until all civilians were secured. There were photographs. Marcus, younger, wearing military tactical armor that was scorched and dented. His face was covered in dirt and blood, but his eyes, those same warm brown eyes she knew were hard as stone. In another photo, he stood with a group of soldiers, all of them armed and wearing combat gear. The caption read, "Special Operations Task Force 7, Earth Unification Wars." A combat knife sat on the desk, well-maintained and deadly sharp. Next to it, a handgun that looked like it had seen extensive use. Selenai's hand shook as she picked up a datapad from the desk. It wasn't locked. Marcus must have assumed the room itself was security enough. She activated it and found files, reports, after-action summaries. She opened one at random. Operation Serpent Strike. Commander Webb led a 12-person team deep into hostile territory to eliminate a chemical weapons facility. Despite encountering resistance 3 times the expected strength, the team successfully destroyed the facility and extracted with minimal casualties. Commander Webb personally held the rear guard for 20 minutes, allowing his team to escape. Recommended for the Star of Valor. There were dozens of these reports. Each one described operations that sounded impossible. Rescue missions in war zones. Sabotage operations behind enemy lines. Defensive stands against overwhelming odds. And in all of them, Marcus, or gentle, poetry-loving Marcus, was the commander. The leader, the one who made the hard decisions. She found medical records. The scars she had asked about were all documented. The one on his rib shrapnel from an explosion. The burns on his shoulder chemical fire during an extraction. The circular scar on his thigh, it was a bullet wound, just as she had suspected. Sustained during what the report called the Siege of Mumbai. There was a personal journal, and Selenai knew she shouldn't read it, but she couldn't stop herself. She opened it to a random page. Another nightmare last night. Always the same, the children we couldn't save in Jakarta. Their faces. I can still smell the smoke. Dr. Rahman says this is normal, that warriors carry their dead. But I'm tired of carrying them. When does it end? When do I get to put them down? Further in, transfer approved. I'm being reassigned to the diplomatic corps. Cultural ambassador training starts next month. Part of me is relieved. Part of me feels like I'm running away. But I can't do this anymore. I can't watch more people die. If I have to fight one more battle, I think I'll lose what's left of my humanity. And then, years later, an entry that made her heart ache. Met someone today. A Valorian diplomat named Selenai. She looked at me like I was just a person, not a soldier or a death worlder or a potential threat. Just a person who appreciates art. I didn't realize how much I needed that until this moment. Maybe there's hope for me after all. The last entry was from 3 days ago, right before he left. They're calling me back. I knew this day might come, but I hoped I would have more time. More time to be the person I want to be, instead of the person I was trained to be. I don't know how to tell Selenai the truth. How do you explain to someone that you've killed people? That you're good at it? That some part of you, a part you've worked so hard to bury, is relieved to be called back into service, because at least there, you know what you're supposed to be. Selenai set the journal down, her hands trembling. She felt dizzy, disoriented. The man she had married was a stranger, or was he? Everything he had shown her over the past 3 years had been real. His love of art, his gentleness, his devotion to her. But there was this whole other side of him, a side built from violence and war and death. She was still sitting there, surrounded by evidence of Marcus's secret past when her communication device chimed. A message from the Coalition Assembly. She opened it, still in shock. Emergency broadcast. Human military forces have engaged the Krull Dominion fleet near the Navara system. Initial reports indicate this can't be correct. 12 human vessels against an estimated 300 Krull warships. Human forces are not retreating. Repeat, human forces are advancing into Krull formation. Further updates to follow. Selenai rushed to her view screen and activated the news feeds. Every channel was covering the battle. The reports were confused, contradictory, but all of them agreed on one thing. The humans were fighting in a way no one had ever seen before. A military analyst from the Centauri Republic was trying to explain. Their tactics make no sense from a traditional standpoint. They're aggressive to the point of being suicidal. They're using maneuvers that should destroy their own ships from the G-forces alone. But somehow, it's working. The Kroll fleet is in disarray. Another feed showed intercepted communications from a Kroll ship. They won't stop. We destroyed 2 of their vessels, but the rest just keep coming. They're boarding us. How are they boarding us? Our ship is still fully functional, and they're cutting through the hull like it's paper. Selenai watched in horror as the reports continued. Human soldiers didn't fight like the careful, strategic coalition forces. They fought like they had nothing to lose. They used weapons that other species considered too dangerous, put themselves in situations that should be fatal, and somehow kept winning. A Valorian news anchor was interviewing a xenobiologist who specialized in Deathworld species. "You have to understand," the expert was saying, "humans evolved on a planet that was actively trying to kill them. Predators, diseases, temperature extremes. Natural disasters. Earth is classified as a Class 12 death world, one of the most hostile environments known to produce intelligent life. Humans are persistence hunters. They're built to chase prey until it collapses from exhaustion. They can survive injuries that would kill most species. And more than that, they have this refusal to accept defeat. Other species know when to retreat. Humans just don't." A new update flashed across the screen. Ground operations have commenced on Navarra. Human special forces are engaging Kroll occupation troops. Commander Marcus Webb is leading the insertion team. Selenai's breath caught. Marcus was down there in the middle of a war zone, fighting Kroll soldiers who were known for their brutality. She watched the screen for hours as updates trickled in. The battle was chaos. The Kroll were ferocious fighters, but the humans were something else entirely. They didn't fight to win, they fought like the only alternative was death, and death wasn't acceptable. Then the footage came through actual combat camera footage from a human soldier's helmet. Selenai almost turned it off, but she couldn't look away. The video showed a burning city street. Explosions in the background. Human soldiers moving in coordinated teams. Their movements efficient and deadly. And there, in the center of it all, was Marcus. He was covered in soot and blood. She couldn't tell if it was his or someone else's. His armor was scorched and dented, but his face was calm, almost serene, as he gave orders to his team. He moved with a fluid grace she had never seen in him before, every motion precise and purposeful. A Kroll soldier appeared from a side street, weapon raised. Marcus reacted faster than Selenai could follow. His gun was up and firing before she could even process the threat. The Kroll went down. But then the video showed something that broke her heart. A group of civilian refugees, Novaran locals, were trapped in a building that was on fire. Without hesitation, Marcus ordered his team to hold position while he went in. The camera followed him as he entered the burning structure, emerged with a child in his arms, went back in for more. When he finally came out with the lost civilian, his armor was smoking. He set the rescued family down gently, checked each of them for injuries with careful hands. Then he was back to giving tactical orders, coordinating with other teams, directing the battle with absolute authority. The camera caught him looking directly at it for just a moment, and Selenai saw both sides of her husband in that single glance, the gentle man who tended roses, and the warrior who had fought in countless battles. They weren't separate people. They were the same person, containing both softness and steel. The video ended. Selenai sat in silence, trying to process everything she had learned. Her husband was a warrior. A killer. A hero. A survivor. A man who had seen horrible things and done horrible things, and then chosen to become someone different. Someone gentle. Someone who created beauty instead of destruction. But now the galaxy needed the warrior again. And Selenai didn't know if the man she loved would survive becoming him once more. The war consumed everything. Selenai barely slept, spending every waking moment monitoring the news feeds and battle reports. The conflict had been going on for 2 weeks, and the galaxy was learning what it meant when humans went to war. The initial battle at Navarra had been just the beginning. The Krull Dominion, enraged by their unexpected losses, had committed their full armada to destroying the human fleet. 300 Krull warships against 12 human vessels. Every military analyst in the coalition predicted it would be a massacre. They were right, but not in the way they expected. The humans didn't fight like any other species. Coalition forces followed established rules of engagement, maintain defensive formations, minimize casualties, retreat when overwhelmed. Humans ignored all of it. Selenai watched in horror as tactical displays showed human ships charging directly into Krull formations. They used their own vessels as weapons, ramming enemy ships when ammunition ran low. When their ships were too damaged to continue fighting, they didn't retreat, they set collision courses with enemy vessels and evacuated the crew at the last possible second. It's madness, a coalition. Admiral said during a strategy briefing that was broadcast across the network. No sane species fights like this. But it was working. The Krull Dominion had built their empire on overwhelming force and intimidation. They had never faced an enemy that simply refused to be intimidated. Human ships took damage that should have destroyed them and kept fighting. Human soldiers held positions that were tactically impossible to defend. When Krull forces expected retreat, humans advanced. A captured Krull officer, interviewed by Coalition intelligence, tried to explain the psychological impact. You can't break them. We destroyed their ships, killed their soldiers, and they just kept coming. It's like fighting a natural disaster. How do you negotiate with a hurricane? How do you intimidate a forest fire? Ground operations on Navarra continued for days. Marcus's Special Forces team was leading the effort to evacuate civilians from occupied zones. The reports that came through painted a picture Selenai struggled to reconcile with the gentleman she had married. Commander Webb's team had rescued over 3,000 civilians, operating behind enemy lines in conditions that killed soldiers from other species. They moved at night, navigated through toxic environments created by the fighting, and engaged Krull forces that outnumbered them 10 to 1. One report detailed an operation where Marcus's team had been pinned down by Krull artillery. Instead of retreating, they had called in an orbital strike on their own position, sheltering in reinforced bunkers, while the bombardment destroyed the surrounding area and enemy forces. When the dust settled, they emerged and continued their mission. That's insane, Selenai whispered to herself as she read the report. But there were other reports too, ones that showed a different side of the war. Human medics treating wounded Krull soldiers. Human engineers helping rebuild infrastructure in liberated zones. Marcus personally ensuring that rescued civilians received food, medical care, and safe passage to evacuation ships. A Novaran refugee gave an interview that Selenai watched 3 times. The human commander, Webb. He saved my family. The Krull were burning our district, and we were trapped. He came through fire to get us out. My daughter was injured, and he carried her himself to the medical ship. Then he went back into the fire for others. I asked him why risk his life for people he didn't know? He said, because the alternative is unacceptable. I didn't understand then, but I think I do now. Humans don't accept losing. Not battles, not people, not anything they decide matters. The war's momentum began to shift in the third week. The Kroll Dominion, which had never experienced sustained resistance, was fracturing under the pressure. Their ships were designed for quick conquests, not prolonged conflicts. Their soldiers were trained to terrify and overwhelm, not to face an enemy that fought back with equal ferocity. Coalition forces, emboldened by human success, began launching their own operations. The combined fleet started reclaiming lost territory. The Kroll found themselves fighting on multiple fronts against an enemy that wouldn't quit. But the cost was terrible. Human casualties were severe. Of the 12 ships that had engaged the Kroll Armada initially, only 6 remained combat-capable. Thousands of human soldiers had died. The names scrolled across memorial feeds. So many names that Selenai couldn't read them all. She searched for Marcus's name every time. Her heart in her throat. Terrified she would find it. The turning point came at the Battle of the Threshold. A strategic choke point that controlled access to the inner coalition systems. The Kroll committed their reserve fleet over 100 ships to break through. If they succeeded, they could strike directly at the coalition's most populated worlds. The human fleet, now down to 5 functional ships, met them there. The battle lasted 18 hours. Selenai watched the tactical feeds, unable to look away. The humans were outnumbered 20-1, but they held the line. They used every trick, every desperate tactic, every ounce of determination they possessed. One human ship, the Dauntless, lost main power during the battle. Dead in space, unable to maneuver, it should have been destroyed. Instead, the crew manually aimed their remaining weapons and kept firing until their ammunition was exhausted. When a Kroll ship moved in for the kill, the Dauntless's captain opened all airlocks and vented atmosphere, using the ship's own air as thrust to dodge the attack. They survived. Another ship, the Indomitable, was boarded by Kroll Marines. Instead of surrendering, the human crew fought them hand-to-hand in the corridors. The Kroll were larger and stronger, but humans fought with a viciousness born of pure survival instinct. The humans won, retook their ship, and returned to the battle. By the time the battle ended, the Kroll had lost 40 ships. The human fleet was devastated. 2 ships destroyed, 3 barely functional. But the line had held. That's when Selenai saw the broadcast that would haunt her dreams. It was a direct communication from Marcus's team, sent to Coalition Command and leaked to the news networks. His face appeared on the screen, and Selenai barely recognized him. He was thinner, with dark circles under his eyes. His armor was covered in scorch marks and dents. Blood. Definitely not all had stained his uniform, but his voice was steady as he gave his report. This is Commander Webb. Navarra is secure. All civilian evacuations are complete. Kroll occupation forces have surrendered or withdrawn. My team is... He paused, and for just a moment, emotion cracked through his professional demeanor. We've taken heavy casualties, but the mission is complete. Someone off-camera asked, Commander, how many of your people are left? Marcus's jaw tightened. I started with 36 soldiers. I have 14 still combat capable. The weight of those numbers hung in the air. 22 dead or wounded out of 36. A casualty rate that would have broken any other unit. But Marcus stood there, still ready to fight, still ready to lead. What are your orders, Commander? The voice asked. We hold, Marcus said simply. We hold until relief arrives, until every civilian is safe, until the Kroll are pushed back beyond Coalition space. We hold because that's what we do. That's what humans do. The transmission ended. Selenai sat in silence, tears streaming down her face. She finally understood what Marcus had meant when he said humans weren't gentle because they didn't know violence. They were gentle because they knew it too well. The war continued for another 2 weeks, but the Kroll Dominion was breaking. They had built their empire on fear, and humans had shown the galaxy that they were more terrifying than any conqueror. Not because they were cruel, humans were surprisingly merciful to enemy soldiers who surrendered, but because they simply would not stop. Finally, the Krolls sued for peace. They withdrew from all occupied coalition territory, abandoned their demands, and retreated to their own space. The war was over. The coalition had won, but at tremendous cost. Every species had suffered losses, but none more than humanity. Nearly 40% of the human forces that had deployed were dead or wounded. Sal and I waited for word of Marcus. Days passed. The human ships began returning to port, but there was no message from him. Fear gnawed at her. Had he survived? Was he among the wounded? The dead? A week after the ceasefire, she received a communication from Earth's military command. Mrs. Webb, Commander Webb is alive. He sustained injuries during the final operations, but is expected to make a full recovery. He will be returning to Valoria within the month. Relief and anxiety warred within her. He was alive. But what was coming home to her? Would it still be Marcus, her gentle husband? Or would it be Commander Webb, the warrior who had seen and done things she could barely imagine? More importantly, could she accept both? Could she love a man who contained such darkness and such light? She had a month to figure out the answer. The spaceport was crowded with families waiting for their loved ones to return. Sal and I stood among them, her wings folded tight against her back in nervous anticipation. All around her, other species embraced their returning soldiers, coalition forces who had fought alongside the humans. Survivors of the war that had reshaped the galaxy's understanding of what humanity truly was. She saw the human transport ship land, its hull scarred and patched from battle damage. Her heart hammered as the loading ramp descended. Soldiers emerged in small groups, some on their own, others supported by medics or walking with mechanical assistants. Sel and I searched each face, trying to find the one that mattered. Then she saw him. Marcus walked down the ramp without assistance, but everything else about him was wrong. He was thinner, his shoulders hunched with exhaustion. New scars marked his face, a burn across his jaw, a healing cut through his eyebrow. His eyes, those warm brown eyes she had fallen in love with, looked hollow. He was dressed in civilian clothes, but he moved like a soldier, and Sel and I realized that some part of him probably always had. She just hadn't known how to see it before. Their eyes met across the crowded spaceport. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Then Marcus walked toward her, slowly, like he was afraid she might run. When he was close enough to touch, he stopped. "Hello, Selenai." His voice was hoarse, tired. She wanted to embrace him, to feel that he was real and alive and home. But there was a wall between them now, built from secrets and violence and all the things they had left unsaid. "Hello, Marcus," she said softly. "I'm sorry," he said immediately. "For the lies. For the secrets. For not telling you who I really was. Who are you?" She hadn't meant for it to come out as a question, but that's what it was. "I thought I knew. But then I saw you on those combat feeds. I read your military records. I watched you fight and kill and lead soldiers into battle. And I realized I married a stranger." Pain flashed across his face. "I understand if you want me to leave," he said quietly. "I can find somewhere else to stay. I won't blame you if..." "Don't," Selenai interrupted. "Don't make that decision for me. Don't decide what I can or cannot accept." Marcus fell silent, waiting. "I need to know," she continued. "Which one is real? The gentleman who taught at the university? Or the warrior who fought across half the galaxy?" "Both," Marcus said simply. "They're both real. They're both me." He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture so familiar it made her heart ache. "Can we go somewhere private? I'll explain everything. No more secrets." You deserve the whole truth." They returned to their apartment in silence. The place looked exactly as Selenai had left it, flowers wilting in vases, Marcus's earth plants growing wild in the greenhouse without his careful tending. Evidence of a life interrupted. They sat in the living room, the space between them on the couch feeling like a vast distance. Marcus took a deep breath and began to talk. "I grew up during Earth's unification wars," he said. "Humanity had spread across our whole planet, but we were still fighting each other. Stupid, pointless conflicts over resources and ideology and old hatreds. I joined the military when I was 17, barely more than a child. I thought I was going to be a hero." He laughed bitterly. "I became a killer instead. I was good at it, too good. They promoted me fast, put me in special operations. And for years, I fought. I did things I'm not proud of, saw things that still wake me up at night. But I told myself it was necessary, that we were working toward peace. Were you?" Selenai asked. "Eventually. The wars ended. We unified. Humanity finally stopped tearing itself apart and looked to the stars instead. But by then, I was broken. I had spent so many years in combat that I didn't know how to be anything else. I had scars on my body and worse scars in my mind." He met her eyes. "I went to therapy. Spent 2 years working with doctors, trying to process the trauma, trying to figure out who I could be if I wasn't a soldier. That's when I requested transfer to the diplomatic corps. I wanted to prove to myself that I could create instead of destroy, that I could be gentle instead of violent. And Valoria was my chance to start over," Marcus said. "When I met you, when you looked at me and saw a person instead of a weapon, I felt human again. Everything we built together, every moment we shared, that was me choosing who I wanted to be. The art, the poetry, the music that wasn't a disguise. That was me trying to be better than what I was." Selenai absorbed this. "But when the war came, you went back." "I had to," Marcus said, and there was steel in his voice now. "Because I'm one of the few humans who understands both worlds. I can fight when necessary, but I also know the cost. I know what violence does to people, what it takes from them. So when Earth needed someone to lead the operation, someone who could win the war, but also minimize casualties, protect civilians, and make sure it ended as quickly as possible, they called me. Did you want to go?" Marcus was silent for a long moment. "Part of me did," he admitted. "The part that's good at war, that understands tactics and strategy and how to survive impossible situations. That part of me felt relief at being called back to something I understood. But the rest of me, the part that loves you, that built a life here, that tends roses and plays the crystal harp badly, that part was screaming at me to stay." He looked down at his hands. "I killed people during that war, Selenai. I made decisions that cost lives. I ordered soldiers into situations where I knew some wouldn't come back. 22 of my people died under my command. I can give you their names, tell you about their families, describe exactly how each one died." His voice cracked. "I carry them with me. All of them. Everyone I couldn't save. And that weight, it never gets lighter." Selenai watched tears slide down his face, and something shifted inside her. She had been so focused on what Marcus had done, on the violence he was capable of, that she hadn't fully understood what it had cost him. "You could have led with violence," she said slowly, working through the thought as she spoke. "You could have been cruel and brutal. You had the capacity for it. But you weren't. Even in war, you protected civilians. You treated enemy wounded. You tried to minimize suffering. That wasn't the warrior in you. That was the gentleman I married, refusing to be erased even in the middle of hell." Marcus looked up at her, hope and pain warring in his expression. "You chose to be gentle," Selenai continued. "Not because you didn't know violence, but because you knew it so well. You chose beauty and art and poetry after seeing ugliness and death and destruction. That's not hiding who you are, Marcus. That's choosing who you want it to be. But can you accept that? Marcus asked quietly. Can you accept all of me? The parts that create and the parts that destroy. Selenai thought about the combat footage she had seen, about the military records, about the man who had fought across the galaxy to protect people he didn't know. Then she thought about the man who brought her flowers every morning, who recited poetry in the moonlight, who spent hours trying to master an instrument his hands were too large for. She moved closer to him on the couch, closing the distance between them. I fell in love with a man who was gentle, despite having every reason not to be, she said. I think that's more impressive than someone who's gentle because they don't know anything else. Marcus pulled her into his arms, holding her like she might disappear. She felt him shake as emotion overwhelmed him, relief and grief and love all tangled together. I don't want to be Commander Webb anymore, he whispered into her hair. I want to be your husband. I want to teach poetry and tend my garden and learn to play the crystal harp better. Can I still have that? After everything? Yes, Selenai said. But no more secrets. You don't have to carry all that weight alone. Share it with me. Let me help you carry your dead. They stayed like that for a long time, holding each other in the silence of their apartment. Outside, Valoria continued its peaceful existence. The war was over. The Kroll had been driven back. The galaxy was learning a new truth about humanity. They were capable of terrible violence, but they chose peace when they could. Over the following weeks, Marcus slowly returned to life on Valoria. It wasn't easy. He had nightmares that woke them both, nights where he would sit in the greenhouse at 3 a.m., staring at nothing. Selenai learned to recognize the signs, learned when he needed space and when he needed her presence. The university welcomed him back, and he proposed a new course, The Paradox of Humanity, Warriors Who Choose Peace. It became one of the most popular classes on campus, with students from dozens of species trying to understand the strange duality of human nature. Humans are predators, Marcus told his class one day, Selenai sitting in the back to listen. We evolved as persistent hunters on a world that tried to kill us every day. We have the capacity for incredible violence, for sustained aggression, for pushing ourselves beyond what seems possible. But we also have the capacity for art, for compassion, for love. These aren't contradictions. They're both parts of what makes us human. The question isn't whether we have the capacity for violence, it's whether we choose to use it. A Valorian student raised a hand. But how do you choose? After you've been to war, after you've killed, how do you go back to being peaceful? Marcus smiled sadly. You don't go back. You can't unlearn what you know or undo what you've done. But you can choose, every day, to be better than your worst moment. You can plant flowers instead of fields of fire. You can create beauty that balances the destruction. And you can remember that the capacity for violence doesn't define you, your choices do. Selenai found herself understanding humans in a way she never had before. They weren't gentle despite their nature. They were gentle because of it. Because they knew, intimately and personally, what violence cost. Every human carried the memory of their species' bloody history, every war and atrocity and moment of darkness. And they chose, collectively and individually, to be better. One evening, several months after Marcus's return, they sat in their garden. Marcus was playing the crystal harp, still clumsy but improving. Selenai was writing poetry, trying to capture the complex emotions of the past year. Tell me about Earth, she said suddenly. Marcus set down the harp. What do you want to know? Everything. The real Earth, not just the pretty parts. So Marcus told her about the ice ages that nearly destroyed early humanity, about the predators that hunted them, about the diseases that killed millions, about the wars that devastated continents, but also about the first music, the first art, the first moment humans looked at the stars and decided to reach for them. "We almost destroyed ourselves a dozen times," he said. "Climate change, nuclear weapons, pandemics, wars. But every time, we chose survival. We chose to keep going, to be better, to build something worth saving. That's the real human strength, not that we can endure, but that we refuse to give up." "I think I'm beginning to understand," Selenai said softly. "What?" Marcus asked. "Why the galaxy needs humans. You're a reminder that peace is a choice, not a default state. That gentleness means more when it comes from strength rather than weakness. That hope matters most when you have every reason to despair." Marcus smiled, and it was the same warm smile that had made her fall in love with him years ago. "We're just trying to be worthy of the second chance the universe gave us." They sat together in the garden, watching the twin moons rise over Valoria. The war was over. The secrets were revealed. And somehow, impossibly, they had found their way back to each other. Marcus reached for Selenai's hand, and she took it. His hands were scarred and strong, capable of both violence and tenderness. They were the hands of a warrior. They were the hands of an artist. They were the hands of the man she loved, in all his complicated, contradictory humanity. And that, she realized, was exactly who she wanted him to be.